Hello, and welcome to another Warlock's Gantlet devlog. It has been well over a year since the last video in this series, and though development has neither been even nor continuous in that time, it has been significant. So I will cover many subjects or items in this episode. One of them will explain this interesting visual, which I hope you're all enjoying at the moment. But I think we'll start elsewhere with the pixel editing software that I called Kaleidomancer. Kaleidomancer, as some of you might know, is the third pixel editing program that I have written for the sake of game development. I finished it over a year ago, and I had promised to make a video about all of the facilities in the program. But I think I will break that promise because it would be like a tutorial, and I don't think most of you would find that interesting, and it would take a lot of time to make. It is available for download on itch.io, and I will provide a link to that in the description of this video. This program was made for me, and I only provide it on itch for people who are curious and want to play around with it. I don't support it, so don't expect me to make updates or solve bugs for problems that you have. I will only solve bugs when I find them too annoying for me. But if you want to play around with it, it exists there. Before we leave to talk about something else, I would like to highlight this color palette down here. This is the official Warlock's Gantlet 256 color palette. And I enabled such a programmable, savable, loadable palette for this program because I wanted the limitation of 256 or fewer colors for the game. I really enjoy the aesthetics of games from the early 90s that often used such a palette. And I thought that having the limitation would help me achieve something similar. And I'm rather proud of both the implementation of the palette and the selection of colors here, though they might be subject to change if I think that some of them are unnecessary or I simply need other ones. As a final note, I'd like to mention the gauntlet in the room here. This is the zoomed in mouse pointer for Warlock's Gantlet I designed some months ago. I designed it at the same time that I was making the in-game shop. Now the shop isn't completely finished, but it is largely done. And despite that, I will not show it in this video because the game is not currently in a state where that is easy to do. But worry not, it will be in a future installment in this series. I just thought you'd like to know what this is and also have the information that such a thing has been implemented. From one art-related thing to another. This is the rather recently finished latest promotional illustration for Warlock's Gantlet. It is only the second such. You will probably see this start popping up here and there, like on Steam and on t-shirts, and you can see it in my stream as well. It is the first oil painting that I have made in quite a few years, and it seems like I had gotten a bit rusty in that interval because it took me longer to make than I thought it would. But I am very happy with it, and I think in many ways it represents the feeling of playing Warlock's Gantlet a little bit better than the other one that I made, which you've probably already seen a few times. Now the hawk-eyed among you might have noticed that the protagonist in this painting is a woman, whereas in the other painting it was a gloriously bearded man, though they are both facing the undead that I seem to have a bit of a penchant for. This is representative or meant to be representative of the fact that you can switch or choose your own protagonist, at least their face. In the demo on Steam, you can pick between an elderly woman and an elderly fellow, and the characters in these paintings are modeled after those faces. You press N to switch, if you were wondering. The intent is that in the full game you will be able to at least pick between a large-ish number of pre-made faces, or, ideally, that you will be able to compose your own face avatar from a number of preset head or face shapes, eye shapes, mouth shapes, nose shapes, and hairstyles. Though it is very likely that all of the hairstyles will be grey, because you're meant to be playing an elderly protagonist. The reason for that is in the lore of the world that I will not go into right now. Well, here we are in Warlock's Gantlet proper, as it is currently. And it is rather different from when I last showed it on one of these devlogs. In the last devlog I made, I believe, I spoke of wanting to implement an open world or overworld. And that is what this is. I can show you the current map of said overworld. It's not particularly large, I think 600 by 600 meters or something like that in-game distance. The procedural generator that creates this landscape is far from finished yet, but it makes a at least mostly traversable land that is quite free from pitfalls, though not entirely. And it has, for fun, a bit of water that you can walk on. I do hope to make water that you can actually dive into eventually, but we're, I'd say, quite far from that still. I'm very happy to have implemented this, as you might have remembered that I wasn't sure whether I could, and that I was kind of reluctantly also thinking of a plan B if this had not been possible. Now, currently in this version there are no enemies in this overworld, there are no dungeons, and there are no shops accessible. Though all of those things are possible. I have had liches, enemies, running around in this environment, and I've also had shops that you could enter when I was building and testing those. Now, as I said, I'm not going to show the shops, nor am I going to show the liches or enemies running around, because that takes a bit of setting up, and I just want to get this video out, honestly, and inform you about the current state of the game. And I sincerely hope that I will make more videos soon where both of those things, enemies and shops in the form of actual buildings, are present in this world. One thing that I have added, and can show you, so to speak, is some music, which I'm hoping you will hear, or be hearing right now. I started playing around with melodies and songs a while ago, and I've made several tracks of different complexity. Making music is something I'm very new to. And this is the first song that I can consider mostly finished and kind of worthy of being in the game at all. I believe it is about 3 minutes long, or perhaps 4, and it just loops over and over. But it is there, so there has been some progress in that regard as well. Speaking of sound, I have actually also engaged a voice actor to make some lines, primarily for the shopkeeper. Now, those have not been recorded yet, but I'm assured that they will be, and we have had discussions about how they should sound. I have heard samples that he has made for me, And also, actually, we've had discussions about a few other characters, some enemies and such. So hopefully there will be a little bit of oral spice in this game as we move forward in the not too distant future. You might also have noticed the lack of a of a pretty frame, and that's because I've been experimenting so much with the game that currently the frame isn't really relevant, and there's a lot of information being shown in the margins of the screen. Here's the different faces I spoke of previously, by the way. Now, one thing that struck me, I will speed up by drinking both some strength potions and some speed potions, so I can both run fast and jump higher. That makes traversing the landscape far easier. The open world, it can be, in some sense, almost limitless. Not entirely. Depends on how I store it, I suppose. It's not going to be limitless, but it's probably going to be rather many square kilometers at least. And the way the game solves that is by it has a sort of active bubble around the player where it loads in the current environment and kind of extrapolates it from a map. The map, this is a visual representation of the world map, although the actual world map is consisting of a number of, like an array of 64-bit values that in them contain smaller bit values that represent things like elevation, biome, whether there is, I call this decoration, like trees and stuff, what sort of offsets those have from the square column that it's standing on, etc., etc. All those things. So you can think of the world as being mostly in 2D and then kind of an inflated 3D bubble around the player. Now, a rather obvious limitation here is the draw distance. I can only see so far, and in this game I actually want navigation to be an important factor in the puzzles I want to create. I want the player to be reading maps and interpreting drawings and texts to find out, very much in the fashion of Indiana Jones. So I call them Indiana Jones-like puzzles, where to find a certain thing or where to look for it in relation to certain geographical landmarks, geographical, topographical. And I think it would be rather unfair to ask of the player to do that on a many square kilometers large surface with a draw distance of around 40 meters, which this is. This is about 40 meters worth of draw distance. So not much. Therefore, I embarked on a quest to create a better draw distance. Now, I didn't think that I could do this with the drawing every polygon in full detail as I am here. Well, actually, there's a bit of shall we say fudging in the distance. I don't draw them in full detail there, but for the most part I am. But in any case, if I wanted to draw hundreds or thousands of meters rather than 40, dozens of meters into the distance, I did need something that was cheap in terms of processing power. And so I set out to create the long-distance landscape renderer, as I call it. And that takes us back to this. This is the prototype for the long-distance landscape renderer being tested on a rather quickly whipped up large world map with very dramatic differences in elevation. Rather reminds me of some landscapes I've seen in Western movies from the United States. This renderer is based on what I call a height map, which is not my term at all, it's an old term. So it's based off of the elevation data that is contained in the world map. And based on that, it just draws a column with a certain offset from the horizon based on its elevation and your elevation. And it makes that like a vertical line from said point down to the bottom of the screen, actually. Although, columns that are in front are not drawn over by columns that are in back. So we get this somewhat convincing view of the world. Now, since it's such a simple renderer, it just draws these completely vertical columns, and it doesn't care whether you are looking up or down. This doesn't skew correctly as a proper 3D rendition would. But I thought that that would be okay, because this is going to be in the background of, in the game, where you'll have the more accurate, fully texture mapped renderer in front, and something like this behind it, in order to render the majority of the landscape. But since that's going to take up a rather small amount of screen space, I don't think it's important that it's terribly accurate, just quite accurate. And here it is, in Warlock's Gantlet. This is a very recent development. I first tried incorporating the long-distance landscape renderer in Warlock's Gantlet about a week ago. So there are still quite a few bugs and a lot of polishing left to be done on this experience. Primarily the transition from fully texture mapped to long distance landscape renderer is still quite noticeable. More so when we have sharp contrasts, as in when we start the transition from no snow to some snow. I'll show you that here. I usually try to find a high cliff and sort of jump into the air and then use the strategy mode to get a high perch. Now here you can see that especially in this kind of middle distance, there's a great deal of flickering, you might say, a sense of instability. And that is primarily due to the stark contrast between the mostly white patches of snow and the darker grassy patches. If we are in sort of all snowy or all grassy area of the world, it doesn't really become so noticeable. Whoops. That's actually a challenge I've been facing quite a lot when it comes to this, the larger distances here in the open world. That when you try to draw even somewhat large distances, and you draw attention to those distances by having an large open space like this, then the eye is quite easily distracted by, or the eye notices such incongruencies. It doesn't really do that when you're running through a dungeon. Even though you might be able to see just as far into the distance, there's all this detail kind of right in your face, and textures on the walls that are near you, and there are quite often things moving around, enemies, pickups, etc. So I didn't find that this was very distracting or annoying then, but I do now. So one thing I've done is to sort of homogenize the textures. As you can tell here, this texture has two colors, but they're very close in shade. Same with the water texture and the alternative sort of slope texture here. That is so that, especially when actually also on the cliffside. That is because if you're walking straight towards the texture, it's not so bad. But if you see it at a a sharp angle like that, or as you very often do on the ground, because the texture renderer, as it kind of zooms in on the texture, it renders the different pixels at different places on the screen. It really looks like a lot of lights going on and off right in your face all the time, like you're looking at a kind of a Christmas illumination, and it becomes very distracting and actually annoying or even uncomfortable to look at. So I've come to realize that I have to make my textures with that in mind. And since I've now started looking at the world at large, I realize that I also have to think of what textures to put next to each other as the as in the transition between grass and snow. And I'm very likely going to have other biomes as well where that is going to be significant. So I believe that a smooth transition, where I won't be placing, entirely white and entirely green textures next to each other, for example, but rather I think the transition will be, greenish to sort of somewhat, whitish green to greenish white to completely white, in bands across the world, which in some sense will not look as good, but will be easier on the eye, I think. Because while I still think I can improve the long distance renderer, I don't think I can make it good enough that it'll eliminate these problems. But rather I believe I will have to design my way around it. So the open world has opened up for entirely new types of gameplay, like navigating over long distances, and I'm very happy about that. Also, I'm very much looking forward to putting in things like mountains, cliffs, and other large features in the landscape to draw the attention of the player. Because right now it's a rather flat world, and think of having some different biomes. So your regular temperate climate here, snowy, maybe a desert, maybe some more green lush forest somewhere, and whatever else I can think of. Oh, of course, water. There might be an archipelago somewhere. Who knows? That is very enticing, but it has also brought with it a number of new problems. But to celebrate, we can think of the long distance renderer as being a solution to one of the greatest problems of the overworld, which was that you couldn't really see it before. And this I think will be very significant in the development of this game and the intended gameplay. Well, I reconsidered showing you the shop. This is just a screenshot, but at least you can see what it looks like. And I can, of course, explain it to you. Mechanically speaking, the shop is, I'd say, 95% done. There's very little left to do. It functions as it should, according to my testing. But of course, it has not been fully implemented into the game yet. Aesthetically, it is far from done, very far. But it is in a state where I can probably include it in the game relatively soon. Now, as to how it works, I will explain. Now, I might misremember some tiny detail here because it's been a few months since I worked on it. But overall, this is the player's inventory. This is the shop's inventory. These are items that the player wants to buy, and these are items that the player wants to sell. Now, based on what you want to buy and sell, a trade cost is calculated, and that's what will be deducted from your purse once you conclude the trade. It also calculates what your balance will be after the transaction, if you choose to go through with it. And of course, if you decide to sell for a higher value than you buy, then this number will be negative and you will be gaining money. As for the aesthetics, when it comes to screens like this, I think these are golden opportunities to build or enhance the atmosphere. So this is going to be redesigned. I want these boxes to be vertically much smaller, or take up much less space. Probably around 3/5 of the screen, vertically speaking. And I'll probably have the shopkeeper and his shelves and the shop background in the top 2/5, more or less at least. Because I think that's very important, and the golden opportunity to build a bit of atmosphere and include a few little animations perhaps and such. I really look forward to doing that. Now, to conclude this video, I will try to give you a bit of a roadmap so that you can anticipate what is going to happen as we move forward, but I am going to change the background before I do that. I decided to end my video looking at this picture again because I like it very much and I'm very proud of it. With regards to the roadmap, the next big target in Warlock's Gantlet development is a new demo that I am going to refer to as a beta. The first demo I always refer to as an alpha, but we are far enough along now that we are going to call the next demo and then any subsequent demos betas. First, I will talk about what I want to include in that demo, and then I'm going to try to make some estimates as to how complex those things will be to develop, and even worse estimates as to how long that might take. With this beta demo, I want to focus on creating a full vertical slice of Warlock's Gantlet. And that means developing the one major mechanic that I have not yet started developing, which are those navigational Indiana Jones-like puzzles that I've mentioned before. The ones where you find clues in the form of partial maps, scraps of written information, drawings, oral rumors, etc. And you use them, hopefully effectively, to associate them with some location in the game world, the large overworld, which will hopefully include a great bit of exploration and navigation, adventuring, and then you find something valuable, which might be further clues to other quests or the same quest, or it could be a key, treasure, an NPC that gives you information or training or weapons, what have you. But it is very important to the game design. This will be the first demo that shows every aspect of the game, even though most of them will be incomplete. So, overworld, navigational puzzles, enemies in the overworld, shops in the overworld, dungeons, although they are going to be very rudimentary. Probably just a room or two with something to kill, something to grab and get out. Because the dungeons are also going to be a big focus. And of course I had a dungeon generator for the alpha demo, but I don't want to make a big deal out of the dungeons in this demo. They will be there for the sake of making the demo vertically complete, but I don't want to put a lot of time into that. That is going to be a major focus of the game, just as much as the navigational puzzles. And they sort of deserve their own demo, honestly, in the future. So how difficult is this going to be to make, and how long might it take? Well, I don't think it's going to be very difficult. Except for the navigational puzzles, all of the systems that I mentioned are 90-ish% done. I've done a lot of work on them. And tested most of them in the world. So I don't think there's a big problem there at all. But there's still work to do, so I'd estimate at least 2 to 4 months on that. And then, for the navigational puzzles, which is a completely new system, even though I think it's going to be quite simple to make, it's still going to take time to make. So I'd say 3 to 6 months on that. And then, of course, I want to add some stuff. I want to make a new nice UI. I want to make a new main menu with an options menu. I want to perhaps make a new enemy and some new animations for the ones that already exist. And to incorporate some of that voice work. You know, there's also all sorts of little things that will add up. So I think we can add another 4 to 6 months there, because that's going to take a lot of time too. So where are we then? I think I said 2 to 4, 4 to 6, and 4 to 6 months, right? So at least 10 months and at most 16, thereabouts. So it's still a fair bit of time left before there's going to be any kind of release. That sounds almost depressing, but to me it actually feels pretty close. I'm just trying to be realistic about the times. So there you have it, my thoughts, my ambitions, and my tentative roadmap. I hope you're a little bit excited for it. Now, I do stream my development live on Twitch. You can find that, a link to that Twitch channel in the description of this here video. And Warlock's Gantlet I specifically stream on Thursdays. So if you want to see development on Warlock's Gantlet, I stream that on Thursdays. I also have fixed streams on Saturdays and Mondays where I do, well, I might be working on Warlock's Gantlet on Saturdays too, because it's a bit of a whatever I want to do stream. But I also do other things. Sometimes I play games, sometimes I work on some little side project game. And then I do completely unrelated hardware development, or hardware related development on Mondays, if you're curious about that. If you made it this far in this very long update video, I'm very grateful. Thank you so much for taking an interest, a great interest in this project. And I wish you a very good day. Goodbye.